So before we open it up to the audience, who I'm sure will have lots of questions, I just thought I'd ask you a few questions about your works. I wondered, what was the original idea for each of your films? And how close was the final product to the original ideas that you started with? Andrés, did you want to kick things off?
Sure. I went to a BTV last year, to do a visit to the Malartic mine, which is the biggest open pit gold mine in Canada, and as part of a summer school at Concordia University in Montreal. And then there I learned about all the mining that happens in Abitibi in northern Quebec. And I got to talk to someone about Jutel, which is a real place, abandoned city. Mm-hmm. And then after that visit, I don't know, just felt my mind started to work on that, and it just happened. And then I don't know, I worked also on the process, many parts that I put together were also kind of filled up well after shooting the fictional part, and then just trying to fill up some holes or complementing the ideas.
It's a really interesting film, and I like that you use different types of footage to tell your story. Did you have that in mind when you started out? How did the pieces come together?
Yeah, in the past I've done work with different mediums, and also I like to work analogically also. Mm-hmm. The part of Africa, it's glass. It's also, it was not digitally made per se. So yeah, I don't know, I like to mix all these formats.
Well, you do it very well.
Thank you so much.
Pixie, Pragmatopia is such an interesting idea. I have a feeling that it was kind of germinating in your mind for quite a while. How did it come about? What was the original idea, and how did it unfold from there?
Well, it's been with me for a long time. It was based on a short story I wrote when I was about 16, I think, which itself was from a dream. But the application that I put in when I finally was able to get funding was to make a photo essay. It was supposed to be a photo essay. And I think I just, I didn't feel I think when you have a production fund and you have to make something to show for it, and I didn't feel like I had time or space to experiment with the photo essay. We had a 2-week shooting schedule. It was tight, and through conversation with cast and crew, we all decided just to make it a live action fiction, that there was enough substance there. So maybe next time I'll do a photo essay.
Well, I'm really glad you didn't do a photo essay this time, because we got a really amazing film out of that. Matthieu, what was the idea behind apartment number 2? I know that you use different elements. What were some of the things that you looked at, and what inspired you to create this film, and did it turn out the way that you expected it to?
Yeah, so I had no plans for this film.
Sometimes the best things come without a plan, yeah.
I was house sitting someone's cat that week, and I brought my camera gear, and the plan was just film random things and record sounds and come up with something.
Well, it's really beautiful. Is that a way that you prefer to work spontaneously?
Yeah, that was kind of the start of me working on it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing it with us. I wondered, as filmmakers, with these works or with other works that you've done, what is the research process that you carry out? So sometimes, or what are the things that you look at and think about when you're working on a film? Whether it's something that you create that day on the spot, or it's something that takes a while to do. Pixie, I know that you you mentioned the stories or recollections of a Hiroshima survivor in your film description. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. I think the main source of research was a book about Chernobyl, actually. It was a book called A Wormwood Forest, which is written by a Ukrainian-American botanist journalist who goes to the Ukraine and goes to Chernobyl and discovers that the wildlife, the animals, are actually thriving because there's no human cultivation, there's no hunting. So it was this interesting paradox of like, here's this contaminated area that humans aren't supposed to live in, and yet the wildlife are thriving. And there's a great documentary called The Babushkas of Chernobyl as well, which shows the people who refuse to leave their lands. And for the most part, I mean, I don't know if you would say that they're thriving. I think thyroid cancer was something that came for a lot of those people, but they're still, living there. So that was an inspiration to sort of just take the nuclear dystopian narrative that we've kind of grown up with and turn it on its head and say, well, maybe something else could actually come out of it. But I did also research a bit about Hiroshima and read this one account by a Canadian woman named Setsuko Thurlow, I believe, who's a major anti-nuclear activist, and was really inspired by her description of living through that bomb, and that's what inspired the monologue that I created for Zoë's character.
Yeah, it's really, you can tell that there was a lot of thought that went into the creation, and all I like the way that you had, them go into someone's house and look at the pictures, and it's a really interesting idea of like wondering who are the people who lived here and what were their lives like, and then what could our lives be like going forward in this new world. Andrés, you mentioned Joutel, and there's some footage from Joutel in the film. There's also the footage from an African nation. Could you tell us a bit about the stories behind those footage and some of the research that went into the creation of We Might Have Been Heroes?
When I started to think about the project, I was like first thinking about money and gold, and the sometimes the absurdity of these ideas, like extracting something out of the earth to put it in a safe, and then all the dynamics that could be like some of the dynamics that are behind that. So because Joutel was also copper mine, and I was thinking about copper, and then I just ran into an article about Akbogloshi, which is a real place in Ghana, and is the biggest e-dumpster in the world. So then I tried to connect these two places, which the connection was copper. So what happened was I started to do research and try to contact people in Ghana. And I ended up talking to a Mexican photographer that she went to Akbogloshi and took footage. And she was living in New York now. She's living in New York now, and I got in touch with her, and she gave me the footage, and then I worked it out. And then another friend did the music that is behind that part. Then I went to a BTB like 4 times already. I mean, there is really far away. And I got in touch with the lady that talks there, Madame Belli, and then she happened to have like a treasure because she had like a box full of souvenirs and tapes and so many things about Joutel. And her daughter was the last baby that born in Joutel. So for her it still is very important, Joutel. So yeah, it was a process of maybe 1 year of work. From the first draft of the script to being able to put all these pieces together. But I guess the primary source is people, right? Like real stories and real people.
Yeah, that's what makes the story powerful.
Real places, because we went to Joutel to shoot, which also was really far away and kind of complicated because of the black flies.
there must have been some of that experience in shooting Pragmatopia. Matthieu, you're in Pragmatopia. I wonder what you could tell us about what your experience was like being on the other side of the camera, being an actor, and what it was like shooting in the woods. Or being in the woods, being filmed.
Yeah, because this was my first time like acting in a film, and before that, as a director, I remember an actor telling me that they thought the advice they would give a director would be to act in a film so that you know what it's like being on the other side. And I think that was really true, really great experience too.
Yeah. What did you take away from being on the other side of the camera that you might put into practice in your own films going forward? Like what did you learn as in your experience of being on the other side of the camera that you'd like to adapt to your own filmmaking? What did you learn from the brilliant Pixie Cram? Or just anything. Like what's it like being an actor, shooting on location outdoors? Like how does that feel?
Well, I really like Pixie's very simple directions and not giving a lot of directions. I really like that.
So you get to be more like spontaneous, which is something that works really well for you in your art.
Well, thanks. I think I've asked a lot of questions, and I'm sure all of you have some questions. So let's open it up. You, sir, with the striped shirt from the.
Hey, Pixie. My question was for you, actually. Matthieu just touched on it for a second, but I was wondering, how do you like to go about directing your actors? I was wondering if you could talk about your workflow, I guess you could say, when you're on set with your actors.
Okay. Yeah, well, I actually studied acting too. I studied at Concordia University, it wasn't for me. I'm not comfortable in front of the camera usually. So I think, ironically, I feel like that's the area where I need to keep working. I don't think I'm a very good director of actors. I do animation in my other life, so it's like working with objects like in a studio and where you can kind of control the outcome. But despite having studied Stanislavski and all these acting method techniques and having done some, I tend to direct them to stay quite subdued, so there's not a lot of emotion, because I like it when the emotion is sort of below the surface and really ambiguous and kind of. I guess I also take inspiration from directors who sort of just turn the camera on and then just see what happens. Like, let's just see what happens, and so giving minimal direction and then letting the take go quite long to see what will happen if after the instructions run out they start to do things, because from my experience, they just had intuition that I couldn't give them, like, so often too the crew and the cast was collaborating with me, making suggestions as well. So, I don't think my character would do that in this scene. I think she would say this or he would do this. So there was a dialogue going on as well, and I benefited from that. Yeah, that is your question.
Pixie, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the clothing in your film, like both the scene where they try on the clothes they find in the house, and also just the clothing that you chose for the other scene, these like really vibrant dresses and that kind of thing people are wearing.
Yeah, well, I worked with a costume designer, Joanne Osterman, who may still be here. Yes, she is. She's in the back there. We were like, okay, well, what are we gonna do for this futuristic sort of like, there's, the girls coming from, or the young women coming from like a more of a military type situation, like a militant state or something. We did some research, we saw some interesting videos of people dancing in the woods and they were wearing grays and blacks. And so Joanne thought like pretty neutral palette for them, and I found those army backpacks. And then the idea of in the farmhouse and discovering all this clothes, it was like, for me, it was like the characters had been traumatized or had lost a part of their childhood to the experience that they'd had. And So for them, it's like playing dress up, even though they're people in their early 20s, you know, just sort of becoming children again. And I wanted that contrast. And also, I think, for me too, because this is very much about patriarchal regimes, the feminine coming in through the clothing, so the dresses and the flowers, and that idea of returning to the feminine with the land and all that is part of the design. We were filming in Foymount, which people know this is like an old abandoned, it was a radar base before the satellite era, and it's an amazing highest elevation of, I think, in Ontario where people actually still live, like big, and a couple hours west of Ottawa. And we were there at the location, and for some reason, these guys were just doing driving training. I think they had a little sign in the window that said driving training. And I was like, oh my God. So we staged the shot, and we had permission to be on Kids General Store on that property from the guy who owned the property. So we were like, okay, well, let's just, I was gonna go up to them, and Katrina, the blonde actor, said, no, do it and then ask forgiveness later. So I'd say it, which is something I have to learn. So I was like, okay. And so we were on private property, and I was like, they're just driving through our shot. They couldn't even tell our camera was running, right? We just hid the actors in the corner, and then it was like, record, and we just, you know. So that's how that came about. Yeah.
That's really cool. Thank you all for coming out this evening, and we hope to see you again tomorrow night, Saturday night, and next Thursday.